Morning. It is 9:05 a.m. on Wednesday, April 10th, 2013, and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board is now in session. Ms. Rowe, any public comments?
No public comments at this time.
Item 3, adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of March 13th, 2013. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? The minutes are approved. Item 4, presentation and update by the Texas Department of Transportation on the Northeast Parkway project from the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan. And as I mentioned, this is a project that has been on the CMP since 2008. We've got Mr. Leos here from TxDOT here in El Paso to give us an update. Mr. Leos?
Mr. Chair and board members, good morning. For the record, Jerry Leos, Project Development, TxDOT. We're here this morning to give you an update on the Northeast project. And what I'm going to do is, of course, turn it over to our consultant, Mr. Steve Schett from Jacobs Engineering, to give you the update. And without further ado, Mr. Steve Schett.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. My name is Steve Schett. I'm a transportation planner with Jacobs Engineering in Dallas, Texas. We are the project managers for the development of the schematic design and environmental documentation for the Northeast Parkway. The Parkway was conceived about 10, 12 years ago as an alternative to I-10, as a way to route through traffic around the congestion in I-10. And it was envisioned mainly for through and truck traffic and not as a commuter facility. It is a joint development of the New Mexico Department of Transportation and the Texas Department of Transportation, conceived by both as something that was worthy of pursuing. The corridor, as you see on the screen there, extends from Loop 375 down at Fort Bliss near the Rod and Gun Club for about 20 miles to the I-10 New Mexico 404 interchange near Anthony. For the New Mexico portion is about 10 miles, as is the Texas portion. The New Mexico portion is pretty much on existing state rights-of-way. The Texas portion, on the other hand, is virtually all new right-of-way. The key stakeholders in the project are the RMA, the City of El Paso, and also, I should say, the PSB, El Paso Water Utilities, and the City of El Paso. All three together is basically one entity. Much of Northeast El Paso is owned. The land is managed by the PSB. Another key entity stakeholder is Fort Bliss. They're at the southern end. They have about 10% of the proposed right-of-way that they control. In New Mexico, virtually all the land is owned by the Bureau of Land Management, or excuse me, managed by them for the federal government. Other important stakeholders that we have coordinated with over the years have been El Paso County, Doña Ana County, El Paso Natural Gas, and El Paso Electric. Both of those last two companies have major production distribution facilities in Northeast El Paso. Now, a brief word on some of the design features of the project, some of the controlling criteria that we were using in the development of the project. We're assuming a 350-foot right-of-way, which is rather spacious for what we conceive of as a 4-lane limited access facility, 70-mile-per-hour design speed. The objective for this project was to minimize the use of frontage roads. This is envisioned mainly as a through facility. We do anticipate, though, that at the south end of the project, between Dyer and Railroad, that there would be frontage roads that would access the industrial properties along Railroad. The close relationship of the Union Pacific rail line and Railroad makes construction of an interchange at Railroad a bit more expensive. So we elected to have access to the industrial properties along Railroad from an interchange at Dyer. Of course, interchanges would be at Loop 375, which is the southern terminus, Dyer, US 54, which would be a big interchange, McCombs, Martin Luther King, and then in New Mexico, at New Mexico 404, New Mexico 404/213, that intersection there, and then also at the far east end of the project at I-10. The traffic analyses conducted to date have suggested that we would have level of service C, which is a stable flow of traffic with a 4-lane facility. I won't dwell too much on the details of this, but this just basically shows what the engineers would do. This is what's called a typical section for the ultimate project. You see two lanes in one direction, 2 in the other, and a rather wide median. This and no frontage roads. This facility, looked at on the right-hand side, does show a 10-foot bicycle path. The bicycle path would extend between Railroad and the New Mexico state line. Now, during the course of project development, we had been working, of course, with New Mexico DOT, and it became clear that New Mexico was with us in spirit, but the money just wasn't there. And so accordingly, TxDOT had to rethink some of the how they were going to implement the project. And one of the concepts that they developed to do this was what's called a Super 2, which is basically half the project. One thing we didn't want to do is to build a 4-lane, even if we had the money, to build a 4-lane facility and dump 4 lanes of traffic onto a 2-lane New Mexico 213 and 404. And the interchange at I-10 404, frankly, couldn't accommodate that. So we rethought the project concept, and we came up with what's called here the Super 2, which is just for the Texas portion of the project, and it's a 2-lane facility. There's an interchange down, of course, down there at Loop 375, and we show one up at US 54, and then there is a terminus on Martin Luther King just south of the state line there. The 2 lanes, again, it's a 2-lane limited access facility. We buy the 350-foot right-of-way, but we would only build 1 lane in one direction and 1 lane in the other direction. We would have passing lanes here and there as required, so we could, so if there's some slow-moving truck traffic, cars could get around it. The structures would be built to their ultimate design. So we'd have the bridges, the 4-lane bridges, 2 lanes and 2 lanes would be built, but we'd only be striped for 1 lane. And the interchanges at McCombs and Dyer would be deferred to a later date. We just build the one at the south end, one at 54, and then the one up at Martin Luther King. And here's the typical section of the Super 2 concept, again showing the 1 lane in one direction.
Excuse me for a minute.
Yes, sir.
What is level C service compared to?
Well, there are
X
6 A, B, C, D, E, F. A being virtually no traffic. C being what is called, the traffic engineers called a stable flow, and F being just gridlock. Jerry, do you have a number of off the top of my head? Can't remember what the number of cars would be for level of service C, but it's.
We would be looking at roughly about 1,800 passenger cars per hour.
Could you step up to the mic?
Right. Mr. Adame, as far as level of service C, we would be looking at roughly about 1,800 passenger cars per hour per lane. But like Steve was saying, that's the difference between free flow level of service A and then level of service F, pretty much gridlock. So level of service C being, like you said, stable flow, somewhere in between those 2 extremes.
Do you anticipate rush hour traffic or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as the design of a highway, we typically design for a 20-year traffic projections. So I don't know, I think Steve is going to get into the discussion as far as traffic projections on this project. And maybe
Okay.
that could answer your question a little bit more.
Right, as relates to, will the service go from C to F at that
Oh, no.
point?
No, no, never would, no.
Excuse me. Jerry, am I right in saying that the text that, I mean, the highway design idea is to design to level of service C? That's why you want to design to?
That's correct. We'll be designing for 20 years out at a level of service C at that point, at 20 years out.
For our, visually, is there any place in our system that you can point to that would be a level of service C so we can, in our minds, take a look at it? At what period of time? Would the freeway be level of service C between the hours of 5 in the morning and 6? It's something like that. Is it
Yeah,
something you can do?
You could almost say that as far as the level of service A, that would be what you just described.
Okay.
I-10 between 5 a.m. and maybe 6 a.m.
Okay.
Between level of service A and B.
Okay.
Once we get closer to rush hour in the morning, I mean, it goes from, let's say, a level of service B to maybe almost even a level of service F
Okay.
at the peak hour,
Thank you.
just to give you an idea.
You don't have a number for Loop 375, for example, between Montana and
As far as
from
level of
10?
service.
Yeah. That flows very well, I think.
As far as the question, the level of service on Loop 375, and I guess what I could describe the Joel Battle segment between I-10 and Montana, that one could reach a level of service C, and again, I'm going to mention the hours between 5 and 6 in the morning, 7 a.m., but once you go beyond 7 a.m., then that level of service goes from, let's say, a B all the way to maybe a D, E. We're getting pretty tight at that hour as far as the AM peak hour. All right.
Okay. All right. Traffic projections, what the subject we were just on here. The Parkway, our traffic engineers looked at the traffic projections for the facility, and they were using this. It's important to stress that at the time that we were working on this project, we used the transporter model. Now that model has since been superseded by something more current. And one of our subsequent tasks as we develop the project further is to revise the traffic projections to reflect a more current regional travel demand model.
Mr. Shedd, how old is that transporter model?
That's about 2009 is when we prepared these numbers. So it's, I would say, 4 or 5 years old. But for illustrative purposes, let me just give you some traffic numbers for you to think about here. At the time we were planning the facility, we were assuming that it would open about 2012, and our design year that Mr. Leas was just talking about, 20 years out, was 2032. We did a couple different scenarios. The first one, again, the first one was with the Super 2, and we used both a non-toll and a toll scenario just to see what the impact might be of tolling the facility. So with the two-lane facility in 2012, under a non-toll scenario, we are looking at anywhere between 20,000 and 24,000 vehicles per day, the Texas portion of the project. That it varies because some of the links, say between McCombs and Martin Luther King, might be a little bit higher than others, but this is the general range. Then we adjusted the model to introduce tolls, and if I'm not mistaken, I'll have to tell you the exact some of the criteria. I think it was 14 cents per mile was our tolling criterion, but the effect is it reduces volumes to the order of 12,700 to 18,200 vehicles per day. This is a two-lane facility, tolled.
Is that both directions?
Yes.
So somewhere between 15,000 vehicles each day as a tolled facility and 22 as a non-tolled?
Correct.
And I believe the reason that you're looking at the non-toll and toll is because in today's world, there is no funding for this project, and potentially toll may be looked at or managed lane as a way to build this or get this project constructed.
That is correct. Many things happened midway through the project. One of them was that tolling as an option, the district directed us to examine that. And so we did some preliminary estimates, both in terms of construction of tolling facilities and also of the impact on our traffic projections. And these are the numbers that we came up with.
Total cost for the project?
Total cost, again, this is the Texas section only. Super 2 is about $190 million, and these are 2009 dollars. The ultimate, with a four-lane facility with all the interchanges, would be about $233 million.
I wanted to mention, I'm still stuck in the question that Commissioner Adami had asked in terms of the level service C. The vehicles projections that we saw in the previous slide, those are estimates from the MPO model that's 4 or 5 years old. And those are estimates that are based, for lack of a better term, at a 50,000 view level. And then once construction monies are found for the project, then someone takes it over and does a more detailed analysis down to the intersection and down to the lane level. So the numbers that we see here can change up or down depending on the year, depending on many things. So the point that I'm trying to make is that these numbers are just numbers at a regional level. When you get to the project, then you consider many more different variables, and that will tell you how many lanes and how many.
That is correct. And in fact, these are the big picture numbers, but we did indeed, using the transporter model, we did indeed look at very specific turning movements at the various interchanges. We did compute those. So we do have those. But again, you're quite right. We need to revisit this with the current model.
Thank you.
Question. Just a
Yes.
question. On the tolls, are you talking about the entire 20 miles or just to the Texas?
No, this is just the Texas portion.
But long-term, ideally, it would cover the entire 20 miles?
Just my understanding is just the new construction.
But we have the other side of it.
No currently existing lanes would be converted to a managed lane. This is just new construction and using the managed lane concept as a way to pay for this new construction.
Okay.
Because I don't believe any funds really are available other than some environmental funds. None of the right-of-way has been purchased at this point. Is that correct?
That is correct. The expectation is that we would take it up to the right-of-way acquisition stage. We would clear it environmentally. We'd clear it from a design perspective. And by the way, I should have mentioned that the design has been cleared by the district. That has been approved. And the only outstanding item from Texas's perspective in terms of their current funding levels is completion of the environmental document.
I can let you know that in terms of about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, there's been ongoing discussions every 2 years about tolling in New Mexico, and before the 4 years, it wasn't even brought up. Everybody's realizing that there's other ways that we need to get monies. It will be hard to imagine New Mexico right now tolling, but we don't know about the future. If the need is there, maybe they can find something.
Every highway department, every state DOT is facing funding shortfalls, having to meet, just keeping up with maintenance is ever a larger increasing share. So the question is, how do you pay for new infrastructure? This is definitely one tool that's available, but the community has to be on board and they have to decide what their priorities are. What is, Mr. Shedd, do you have any idea what New Mexico's costs would be to build out to their ultimate configuration?
The no, the short answer would be it would be double what the 233, but
So-
it would be less than that, I'm sure. There, you know, again, the design in Texas is rather gold plate. I don't want to say that, but they didn't cut any corners.
Right.
New Mexico could build a 4-lane facility. Anybody could build a 4-lane facility cheaper. Now, I should mention that New Mexico has, recognizing that the parkway may happen in Texas, they have made, we had identified in some of our earlier discussions, we had identified some improvements that needed to be made in New Mexico, and a couple of them being the 213-404 intersection and also the I-10 404 interchange. And they have made improvements to both the interchange and the intersection, as recognizing that these are just interim measures and that they clearly wouldn't address the long-term situation. And then, of course, they've also added an additional through lane between Las Cruces and the state line. One final point on the traffic, just to bring closure to these numbers here. The 2032 numbers, which are TxDOT's, what was TxDOT's design year. It's typically, they're looking 20 years out. We did 2 scenarios, with the ultimate facility being the 4-lane facility, all the interchanges in place. And again, this is just the Texas portion. Vehicles per day ranging between about 45 to 50,000 under a non-toll scenario, and then under a tolling scenario, they would drop off 15 to 20%, 30 to 41,000. People would elect to, say, take Martin Luther King, or they might take the Parkway for a short segment to 54, and then they go down 54. It varies. A quick word on schedule. As I've alluded to, the design has been cleared for the project, and we have prepared a number of drafts of the environmental document. And we are pursuing for this project what's called we're doing a tiered approach to environmental documentation. It's a Tier 1 and a Tier 2. The Tier 1 is the broad brush, 20-mile-long corridor look at the project, identifying, addressing issues such as project need and purpose, alternatives, getting stakeholders on board, doing a lot of the upfront preparatory work prior to a very specific approach to project development, which would occur in the Tier 2 phase of the project. Now, we've submitted, I think this is about our 3rd draft of the environmental document to the district, to Austin, to TxDOT in Austin for their review and approval. And we're hopeful that on or about late July that we will get the go-ahead from them on the Tier 1 document. And that just clears the broad brush look at the 20-mile corridor. It does not address the Texas portion of the project or in specific terms. And the next step would be to look in very detailed fashion at the Texas portion of the project. And a lot of the work has already been done because it's duplicative for if noise is noise, whether it's at a broad brush look or a focused look. So we're hopeful that process would be a little bit quicker. But there's a whole series, as you can see there, the Federal Highway will have to, the federal funds are involved with this, so they will have to review and approve both documents. November is our estimated date for approval of the Tier 1 EA by Federal Highway. Then we'd have a public hearing for the Tier 1 document with final approval sometime hopefully early next year, and what we call a FONSI issuance, that's a finding of no significant impact, on or about March 15 of next year. We'll be, to the extent that we can, we'll be piggybacking the documentation of the documents so we can save time. And as I said, a lot of the work for the Tier 2 has already been done. A lot of the noise and the demographic work and the environmental justice issues have been identified. We're anticipating on or about September 1 of 2014 to submit the second EA, the Tier 2A, just for Texas. And New Mexico, we're just not going to deal with they'll project development for the New Mexico portion will be up to New Mexico DOT. So this is just for the Texas portion. And we're hopeful that on or about January 1 of 2015, we'll have TxDOT approval of the Tier 2A, Tier 2EA. And the steps that you see here are similar to, for the Tier 2, are similar to the Tier 1, the federal highway review and approval. Unfortunately, I don't think it can be concurrent. I think it has to be consecutive review. I'd like it for that to happen, but that's not my experience. And a Tier 2 public hearing or hearings, it's possible we may have a hearing in New Mexico and in Texas. And then all ending on or about August 15th, 2015.
So nothing could be done as far as moving the project forward until about 2015 based on this projected timeline? First off,
That is
securing the
correct.
funding and then going through this process, the Tier 1, the Tier 2, and then the final environmental.
That is, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the regional significance of this project? How, looking at this potentially as a bypass, as a relief route off of I-10, maybe connectivity between Northeast and the East Side, and has that changed at all with the work that's happening on Trans Mountain 375 with both on the Northeast and the West Side?
Well, the project was, when it was originally conceived, there's issues. There's clearly just traffic congestion issues on I-10. There's hazardous material, hazardous cargo issues. There's climate. There's flooding issues on I-10. The only alternative at the time was Loop 375 over the mountain. Not a very desirable bypass for truck traffic. In our minds, the clear alternative, better alternative, was to use the lower Anthony Gap to the north in New Mexico, which had much shallower grades. Roadway was already there. It was in good, relatively good condition. Now, subsequent to that, the district has elected to pursue other options within town, the Southern Relief Route, Border Highway project, also adding additional capacity to the existing I-10 through town by perhaps adding a lane, but narrowing some of the lanes from 12 to 11 feet, perhaps. I may be speaking out of turn on this, Jerry, but different ways to make the facility work as long as it can, recognizing that there's just so many cars and trucks you can pack through there. But clearly, I think down the road, the Northeast is, we've already seen a lot of development as a function of the Fort Bliss expansion up there along Dyer. That is, and then there's, of course, a substantial amount of planning that the El Paso, the Public Service Board has done in terms of Northeast El Paso and planning for future development there. And the Parkway is an element of that planning. It is shown on their long-range plan. So we think we're in sync with the long-term planning objectives for the city and county of El Paso.
The last question, I promise. The amount of dollars to secure the right-of-way, do we have an estimate of kind of what that number is?
Jerry, Gus, you yell if I'm wrong, but I think it's about 35 million. Is that correct? Yeah.
And that's primarily from the PSB and from Fort Bliss, so those are the two largest landholders for this particular project area?
Almost entirely. It's one of those rare projects where and it's been good in many respects.
Well, that's a blessing.
I'm not sure how Fort Bliss typically, how they would handle a transaction like this. They've been very supportive, and so has Public Service Board or the El Paso Water Utilities.
I know Spur 601 was really a tremendous project for them, and I believe, I can't speak for TxDOT, but I think they have a great relationship. So hopefully that's something, when the time came, if this project was viable, we could get done. Any questions for Mr. Shedd?
I would like to add to the discussion in terms of the need. The fact that Fort Bliss is being supported, I think what they may see, not wishing, I mean, certainly I don't speak for them, but as a used-to-be planner, what I see, if I was commanding the base, I would see this facility where I could put my equipment that goes to the White Sands Missile Range, put it in there, go on a convoy and be undisturbed, as opposed to the way they may go right now using MLK and disturbing traffic. In New Mexico, I guess it was either this past Monday or Tuesday, my days are bunching up. We met with the New Mexico DOT staff, and they're looking to widen 313, is that it?
213?
213, yes. Not immediately, but that's one of the considerations. And we met with the MPO staff, and because we're looking to reclassify the functionality of the facility so it can attract some functionality in terms of federal highway definitions, so it can attract better dollars.
Yeah.
So I would say from that point of view, Fort Bliss may benefit. I was happy to learn that the Public Service Board has put it in through their master plan. I was even surprised to learn that the district staff has been real good negotiators in not securing, but making this facility aware to developers, and developers allowing some concessions. So I see a real strong effort behind this, given the fact that this really is no money. And to the credit of the district, they found some money floating around someplace, and that's why this work is being done right now. And so I like that idea. I like the way the district is working. The other thing that I need to make aware of the board is that I don't know if it was the Joe Wardy term, but sometime around that era, we lost a major car facility because we didn't have sufficient transportation facilities in that corner where the edge of Texas is. And so once whatever year it may be, 5 years, 10 years from now, once this facility comes in, that won't be a problem. And that'll help the regional economy of this area. And then lastly, I do want to thank our chairman for putting this presentation together and giving the public an update. It's a real positive update, and I appreciate your efforts and the district's efforts.
Mr. Shedd, thank you. Is there any other questions? And Ricardo, I wish I could take credit, but TxDOT's doing all the work, and they did the presentation, so it just there was a desire to kind of put this up front. This has been on the CMP for the last 5 years now, so it's great to see an update and see where we're at. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Chaleos, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Item 5, update and discussion and action on the executed project development agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for the development of Loop 375 Americas Avenue Managed Lanes project. Mr. Tejas?
Good morning. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director with the RMA. So item number 5 is really just an update item. We're not looking for any action on this. By way of background, you'll recall that several months back at one of our prior board meetings, the board actually selected the firm that was to be tasked with the environmental and preliminary engineering work for the Americas Managed Lanes. That was done some time ago. However, there was one outstanding item that we needed to get resolved before we could actually issue the notice to proceed, and that was a project development agreement between the Regional Mobility Authority and TxDOT. So what the board did at that same meeting was authorize the executive director to execute the agreement once that agreement was developed between TxDOT and the Regional Mobility Authority. It took a little bit longer than we had expected, but what the commitment that we made at that board meeting was that once it was executed, I would bring it back to the board in final form and provide you with a copy of that. So as part of your backup for this item number 5, you have a fully executed copy of the project development agreement, and it's in substantially the same form as you all saw originally. So that was good news. Subsequent to that, there was actually one final item that was left, a procedural item that we needed to receive, called the Federal Project Authorization and Agreement, the FPAA. And in essence, what that is, it's an agreement between the Federal Highways Administration and TxDOT, and that agreement allows for the expenditure of federal funds on any particular project. So that is referred to commonly as the FPAA. We actually received notice from TxDOT that the FPAA was executed and received on March 4th. Once we received notice from TxDOT, then we issued the notice to proceed to the engineers that are tasked with doing the environmental and preliminary engineering. We also issued the notice to proceed to our general engineering consultant. So on March 4th, we actually began the project. And today, in fact, this afternoon, we have a kickoff meeting with those engineers and the general engineering consultant. So I'm happy to tell you that we are moving forward on this one, and we will keep you posted as we move.
That's good news. And the firm that was selected through the procurement process was Brown and Gay?
Yes, sir.
And we've got Mr. Ahead here today, so I'm glad that we were finally able to get the notice to proceed moving forward to complete the environmental and I believe it's the schematic or design, correct?
Schematic, yes, sir.
Super. Good. Any questions on item 5? Item 6, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute amendment number 1 to work authorization number 13.1 with Atkins North America, Inc. as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant for the addition of certain construction phase services to the Spur 1966 Schuster project with no increase in and not to exceed the compensation amount. And we, as you know, we did the design through our GEC to assist TxDOT with this, and Mr. Tejas, I guess, will now update us on some additional services that we've been tasked to provide. Our design came under budget from the not-to-exceed amount, and so, Mr. Tejas?
Yes, sir. So on this item, as the board was briefed last month, our general engineering consultant completed the design work for this project at the request of TxDOT, and we actually entered into, back in March of 2012, an original work authorization with our general engineering consultant. And actually, in order to step back for the benefit of the public, the way that the Regional Mobility Authority works with our general engineering consultant is that we enter into one master agreement, and that was done several years back. Subsequent to that, for every task, we issue work authorizations. So back in March of 2012, we entered into work authorization number 13, and that was really for the development of the schematic for this particular project, Spur 1966. Then, subsequent to that, in August in 2012, we entered into work authorization 13.1, which was actually for the design of the project itself. So that design, as we were updated by the general engineering consultant last month, that design was complete, and that project has actually been let, and they will begin work here very shortly. After that last meeting, TxDOT approached our general engineering consultant and asked if they would be willing to assist with some of the utility coordination work that's necessary for the project. And as the chair mentioned, there are funds remaining from this work authorization between the RMA and the general engineering consultant. So our GEC and TxDOT worked out a scope, and they've all agreed, and we have the budget. So what we're asking for you today is an amendment to that work authorization 13.1 to assist TxDOT with the utility coordination services. And we have Mr. Rudd here if you have any questions on the specific scope that would be provided. But ultimately, that's what we're looking to do here, and I'm recommending approval.
Any questions for Mr. Rudd? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 6, to execute the amendment number 1 to work authorization number 13.1 is approved. Item 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 14.1 with Atkins North America, Inc. as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant for the design and construction services necessary for the I-10 corridor aesthetic improvement project. Mr. Tejas?
So let me provide a little bit of background on this one as well. So as you know, the aesthetic project has evolved over time. The original project, through the 2008 Comprehensive Mobility Plan, envisioned a review of the entire I-10 corridor from 375 on the west to 375 on the east. So one of the first tasks that we, and in fact, actually, let me step back a bit on this one as well for the benefit of the public. This project, the original intention was a partnership between TxDOT, the City of El Paso, and the Regional Mobility Authority, whereby we would look at that entire corridor, identify aesthetic improvements along that corridor, and then and really develop a conceptual master plan for the entire corridor, and then begin with the total project budget, which was $10 million, just over $200,000, and begin implementing those aesthetic improvements at strategic interchanges. So what we did was we broke the project into various phases. The very first phase then was the development of the conceptual design plan. The City of El Paso provided an artist, and the Regional Mobility Authority provided our general engineering consultant. That conceptual design plan was completed sometime last year, and it looked at the entire corridor. So then the next phase, and that was our first work authorization with our general engineering consultant. We then entered into a second work authorization with our engineering consultant to develop the schematic. Once the artist had and the team, really, the artist, the engineer team, had selected the very first project, which was the airway interchange, then we tasked our engineers with development of schematic for that particular interchange, the airway interchange. So that was the second work authorization. That is now complete. This next step then is actually the development, working along with the artist, the development of the design plans for the project, as well as the going through the letting and the construction oversight. So this is really the final phase for the Americas interchange, which includes everything from the design, the letting and hiring of a construction crew, and doing the oversight for the project. So what we have before you here today is work authorization number 14.1 with our general engineering consultant. And subject to your questions.
You mentioned Americas. You meant Airways, correct?
Airway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just wanted to
Yes, sir.
catch you there. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Item number 7 is approved. Item 8, discussion and action on the Executive Director's Report. A, update on the Transportation Reinvestment Zone projects for the county, town of Horizon City, and City of Socorro. B, update on the procurement process for additional design work on the Americas Interchange project. And item C, update on the CRRMA relocation at 300 North Campbell. Item A, Mr. Tejas.
So item A deals with the Transportation Reinvestment Zone projects that we've been discussing with the County of El Paso, the City of Socorro, and the Town of Horizon City. I thought that I would bring you an update because we haven't spoken about this project in some time. Back in December, you'll recall that each of the entities, the County, Socorro, and Horizon, each adopted their own respective Transportation Reinvestment Zones, and we assisted with that. The intention at that time was, if we develop those transportation reinvestment zones, we would have funding source for a slate of projects that those entities are looking at pursuing. The RMA would assist in development of those TRZs, and then in the end, if we're able to work it out, then the RMA could actually be the project manager for each of those projects. So the transportation reinvestment zones were adopted in 2012. Subsequent to that, we've begun working with those entities, and in fact, at a recent county working session with the county commissioners, we briefed the two new commissioners, Leon and Perez, thank you. We briefed them on this particular project and let them know and offered additional assistance. As we did with the phase 1, we offered the assistance to help guide those entities through this next phase of the projects, which is really the identification of the individual projects, the finalization of the cost estimates, and really getting them into a package so that we can all move forward together. So we've, just as we did before, we're utilizing Terry Quesada, and we're helping the entities develop this program of work. So really just an update for you all, subject to your questions, of course. I'll keep moving and stop me if you have any questions. Item B then deals with the procurement process for the additional design work at the Americas Interchange. As I mentioned to you all at the last meeting, we have executed a project development agreement with TxDOT, which allows us to develop the final 2 direct connectors the westbound frontage, the frontage roads and the clover leaves for the Americas interchange to the ultimate schematic. And along with that item last month, I also asked for, and you all provided the specific scoring criteria and evaluation points for the selection of firms to provide these additional services. So what we did was we put out a procurement looking for firms that would be interested in essentially very similar to an on-call system that we have here for the Regional Mobility Authority. We received a number of submissions, and we are evaluating 17 firms for basically pre-qualification status, and many of them are local, yes. So what we're looking to do, and this is, again, just an update, but what we will be bringing forward for you all is really, what we're looking to do is break out the additional work for the Americas interchange into about 3 separate packages. And those packages would be routed through that expedited procurement process that you all have adopted in the past. So again, just a very brief update, and we'll bring you more details as we work through them.
When do we anticipate those packages going out, Mr. Tejas?
We believe fairly soon. We will be done with the pre-qualification process, I would say probably within the month. And shortly thereafter, or actually concurrent with that, we have the general engineering consultant looking at developing those packages. So I don't want to give you a time, but very soon. Let me spend a little bit of time with the engineering consultants, and I'll send you something by email.
If I can ask a question.
Yes, of course.
On this future work on the interchange, can you add us an item on the scope of work that better gives a better feel architecturally to the design? I think that initially when the district went ahead and made the improvements to the initial overpass, it was just terrific. And then we finished this new construction, and it's like we're hiding this beautiful work that was done. I'm not really criticizing, I'm making an observation. The work that recently has been completed, it's no more than concrete columns that have been painted, as opposed to continuing the design that was initially done on the overpass. Can we rectify that on the other ramps that are coming up online?
I think I can answer that. Originally, when we went through the procurement process for Americas, the first bids basically came in more expensive than we could afford. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, some of the aesthetic or some of the design work, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Tejas, had to come out. So that's, the important part was getting the infrastructure in, and some of that design and aesthetic was changed. Now, there is still dollars available for basically going in and doing some work, but we're not going to do that until the very end. We don't want to do that now, some landscape, and I've seen a couple designs that are really quite striking. Mm-hmm. But that can't be done until basically the ultimate configuration is completed, or else the work that's being done on the next 3 direct connectors, which they're already mobilizing and beginning, would then create an issue. So it just that's kind of why that work was scaled back from the design on the original, on the three direct connectors.
And I realize that, but I still feel we should have kept that kind of architecture ongoing. It is a statement that we make to people coming in and coming out, and it's just, just my opinion that I think we made a wrong decision at that point.
At the end of the day, though, that's what we could afford. I mean,
Yeah.
we had to make a decision about how to get the project built and move forward, and I was in agreement, and the board moved forward, and we selected America's Gateway Builders basically for the design and the procurement, and at the end of the day, that was a $140 million project. It
Right.
was substantial. Mr. Taste, did I cover everything?
Yes, sir. The final item is really just an update on the relocation. As you know, the City Hall, City Hall is being torn down across the street, and most of those folks, including the Regional Mobility Authority offices, have moved to the new location on Campbell. As you also know, we're in a temporary facility here. I believe this will be our only meeting here, but I will keep you posted. The City Hall chambers are being constructed as we speak now, and they're actually getting pretty close. So I believe next month we'll be in City Hall proper, but I will keep you posted. And subject to your questions, that's really all I have for you today.
Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank the IT staff. They did a terrific job tearing everything down from the former council chambers and moving it here, and I guess they're going to have to do the same thing in the next couple of weeks. So I really appreciate all their assistance, and they're always very helpful. So I think it's a great opportunity to thank them publicly for the work that they do. Subject to that, and with no further question, is there a move to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at, on April 10th, 2013 at 9:56 a.m. Thank you.